Hello, I'm Larry Podzoid. Uh, I've been requested to make some more videotapes of, or whatever these are, of myself talking, and so I wanted to say some things tonight in the short span of time I have, this window I have to do this. Uh, I want to talk about to the conservative in the audience. You'll find me radically blasphemous, I suppose. For, and to the moderate and liberal, you'll say, that might be interesting to know that for a fact. If I can gather all this up in my head, I've been meditating on saying. And so we go back to the 1960s. I was born in 1958 and turned 58 in 2016, just a few days ago. And this is a year everybody born in 1958 turns 58, which is cool. It's pretty cool. But but back when I was young, I didn't know things were going on elsewhere in the country, in the world, until I got older in the 70s and was a teenager and began reading books by Dr. Timothy Leary and his colleagues like Richard Alpert and Ram Dass and Albert Hoffman, the inventor who discovered LSD. And those of us who were around in those days, back in 1974, I think, and especially 75, 6, 7, 8, when I lived in Tampa, Florida, and a cultural center that it was at the time, leftover hippies from the 60s who were 10 years older than me, and those people all said, about things. It's such a controversy today about cannabis. See, when people are frightened of it becoming legal, and older people who don't know the whole truth of the story, which is another story entirely. But so back in the 70s, the older hippies told us, the little, like Tommy Chong from Cheech and Chong goes like this and goes, well, So you know what I'm talking about. But the older hippies told us that was natural, and other things like it that God put on the face of the earth for us to use, and that there would be designer drugs coming, and that they would be man-made and dangerous, and to stay clean the hell away from them. So, and that was true later in 1983. I remember on the news it was announced about crack being discovered, and there's the designer drugs since, and so it's all crazy what people do with that. It's just crazy what people do to try to get try to get high. You want to get high, climb a mountain. I mean, anyway, back in the early 60s, as I studied later in the 70s, when I was following all this LSD controversy, which I started to say those of us who talk about those days, who were there in those days, and did LSD, it was the leftover pharmaceutical grade quality back at Tampa that was available then, that ever since 1979 and on, it hasn't existed. If anybody tells you they've got LSD, don't take it, because it doesn't exist anymore. And what's it to do to you anyway? Well, it changes the way your brain operates, and your ego disappears. What you relate to the world around you with, you as an I, your ego, your capital I, I mean, about the way you think, yourself, as an ego, it dissolves, and like Jefferson Airplane said, and you've just had some kind of mushroom and your mind is moving low. Go ask Alice, I think she'll know. But when I went through those years, it wasn't until many years later when I didn't mess with that stuff anymore at all for like a 40-year period now. But Timothy Leary, though, while he was on tenure, I jump all around, I know I do this, but Timothy Leary, when he was on tenure at Harvard as a psychology professor in the 1950s, discovered LSD's legitimate use at the time, which is considered archaic today. but it was used for psychotherapy by psychologists, and Leary did a study, and he found in a prison and gave LSD psychotherapy to prisoners and released that they were released, and he found that they integrated into society better, and the recidivism rate, the return rate to prison, was far lower in the LSD psychotherapy group. So it has had its valid uses, you know. The conservatives don't have to hate, like G. Gordon Liddy was out to get Liddy or Leary, I mean, and they arrested him, put him in prison, and he escaped, and they chased him down and drug him. The CIA drug him back, and he was purported later to be a consultant for the CIA on his book Exopsychology, a manual on the use of the human nervous system according to the instructions of the manufacturer, which meant alien telepathy with aliens. But then in 1995, the year before he died, he released Neuropsychology, and the only thing different he said in the book was the introduction, where he said, because he was in prison when he wrote that, maybe it was a subconscious escape thing, that escapism thing he was writing about, the telepathy with aliens, or was that the CIA making him disavow it? When I was 40 and I realized I was controversially thinking, I kept my mouth shut. But now that I'm 58, I feel I lived back in those days as part of that cultural experience, and my experience is worth documenting. That what I remember at the time was a very wonderful time. I mean, in 1976, when I turned 18, it was legal to drink alcohol, and the whole time till I was 21, and really, I hate to sound controversial, but I thought about it as I was turning 58, 40 years later. I said, well, the fact that I could do that at those ages, I got it out of my system earlier and didn't become an alcoholic later in life. Uh, I'm sorry if that's controversial, but don't drink if you're under 21, and never should experiment with that, because you don't know what you're playing with. The percentage of alcohol can put you in the hospital or make you sick, and you know. So don't do drugs if you don't. They're not legal when you're not of age, and you know. So Leary studies. Leary in his autobiography. I want to point this out. This is another radical fact. I wish I could tell you what page it's on in Timothy Leary's autobiography called Flashbacks. Is the name of the book. Okay, but he said that another controversial thing. You wonder who killed Kennedy, or why, and you put this into the equation. Then Leary said that while he was on tenure at Harvard, working with LSD, researching LSD, he had a woman from, I forget her name or whatever, from Washington D.C. that would come up. She was affiliated with the White House and the Kennedy administration, the Kennedys themselves, Kennedy himself, and she would come up to see him at Harvard and get LSD or psilocybin capsules, or I think it was LSD. He said she got 25 milligram vials. They had it by prescription available at the time legally, and she was taking them to Kennedy. He wrote in his autobiography in the White House. So, and Kennedy was tripping on LSD. I mean, so that's what Timothy Leary says in his autobiography. I wish I could tell you the page number, but it's in there somewhere. So put that in your radical thinking cap, and contemplate that, and I'll have a hit on my nicotine cigarette here. It was 6 years ago yesterday, or the day before now, that I've been tobacco free with the aid of the electronic cigarette. These are wonderful. I'm able to stay off of tobacco, and my lungs have improved. I've quit using 3 different breathing medications, and these are a life-saving thing for millions of Americans and should be kept legal, available for people who choose to use nicotine or want to stop smoking tobacco or an alternative to tobacco. But again, be of legal age before you do that. I mean, I'm not trying to, I don't know what my audience is, just general audience, but I radically think, I mean, what else was I thinking radical about? I didn't know when I lived in Florida, the psilocybin mushrooms that Leary worked with grow in Florida, and you have to know what they look like because they're otherwise poisonous. But they contain psilocybin, and we did so many of those. The group of guys I was with at the time did so many between the mushroom summers of '70, especially '75, '6, '7, and '8. And and then I learned like almost 40 years later that last year or the year before, I read a medical news article that said that psilocybin, people with depression who are treated with psilocybin, uh, a year later, 43 or 48% of them are still depression free, and they've known this for decades. I'm shocked that I hadn't heard this before, and I asked a doctor or two, and they said, yeah, that's true, and so my psychiatrist asked me if I'm depressed, and I say, well, no, and I told her, I said, maybe all the mushrooms I did, the mushroom summers of 60, 75, 6, 7, and 8 knocked the depression out of me even decades later. We certainly did it hundreds of times. There was, I don't want to name names who was in the group, but we remember those times, and two different groups I was in, and I have a lot of good memories under the influence of those chemicals. But would I recommend to do it? Well, I like to do it again today? No fucking way. Pardon my language, but it's like after having been schizophrenic in between for 40, 20 years in between, I'd be like holding a loaded gun to my head to play with those kind of drugs, or for anybody really, because you don't know. It didn't cause my schizophrenia, but I've heard the theory that it activated the genes for it. So if you do psychedelic substances and you have the genes for schizophrenia, it could activate them. So there's a danger inherent that's not mentioned anywhere else, other than through the Dr. Podzoid, who's been through it all. And I turned around and reached, how the hell does the word go? I'm trying to quote a Yes song. Yes is really psychedelic music if you read the words, and so is the Moody Blues, and Pink Floyd is like another subject entirely for another day. But so where does this leave me? Well, the real John Lennon, his music, his solo music is radical. And why would they want to? Why would like conspiracy theories for John Lennon? Why would somebody would want to do away with the government would want to do away with him? He had a song on the Mind Games album called "Free to People," and Free to like the woman's name, People, P-E-E-P. So I think it was, but he said in there, as you slip and you slide down the hill, or was it in hell, on the blood of the people you killed, there's just one thing you better do: free to people now. I mean, so there's all this political stuff. There's Elephant Talk, the song by King Crimson. You look the words up to that. Elephant Talk by King Crimson. That was from 1981, I think, right after Reagan took office. The elephant being a symbol of the GOP party, So we're anti-conservative here. Well, I'm not anti or for anything, I'm just for being myself and surviving in a peaceable, self-accomplishing fashion, is what it's all about. As long as what I want to do, I can do. It doesn't bother anybody else, and nobody bothers me. The government had nothing against me, and I hope they don't now for this video. But I don't bother them anymore, and they don't bother me. Although as I wrote in my book, and I'm working on a third edition to polish it for a more mainstream read. And I'm working on that these days again. But In the Grip of Paranoid Schizophrenia was the book. And did you know if diagnosis of paranoid schizophrenia can change through years of treatment, effective treatment, the diagnosis can be downgraded to schizophrenia residual type. Still have major negative symptoms. The positive symptoms in schizophrenia are the hallucinations and delusions, like when I thought I was John Lennon, and UFO technology that the government had, and hallucinations and delusions, But schizophrenia is, you have to take medication or it'll all come back. I mean, I don't want to be that way, so I take my medication daily. Did I take it tonight? I did. I got out of bed when I took it this evening. I sleep really weird hours, so you're best to email or telephone ahead. For the disclaimer on my door says "Don't bother me," so I answer emails, and I don't want to give my email address as podzoid@gmail. But So I'll see you then, or on Facebook or wherever you want to connect with me. I mean, just tell me you saw the videos and you want to be my friend, or I won't friend you if I don't know you. So that's tonight's radical session with Dr. Podzoid, Binsky, Dr. Podsobinicus, or Podzoidicus, or AKA Dr. Pod.